Welcome back to Foster the Meeple, a channel all about board games and board gamey things. I am Kyle, and right now I should be working, but like Billy Madison, we gotta go back to school. And before we continue this video, I need to touch on something from Billy Madison. Shampoo is clearly better. It's a necessity. Conditioner is a luxury. It's not needed. So we are going back to school today. School has just started, and we've all been to school, I would think. My wife is a teacher. A lot of my friends are teachers. My oldest daughter just started kindergarten. So back to school is in the air here in the King household. So for today's King Court, I thought I would go through games that I thought related to school subjects. So let's get started. Today, first period is going to be English. We had to do book reports in English, right? So let's talk about the book Dune. And just like any other book report, when you get a book, you would look to see if there's a movie. So I would probably just watch the movie of this instead of reading it because it's very, very hard to read. I was not able to get through this book, even though I own it. But let's talk about Dune, and the game that goes with Dune is Dune Imperium. Well, that's the Dune game that I have. I don't have any other Dune games, even though there are hundreds of them. And this is more based on the movie. I get that. But like I said, if you're doing a book report, you're probably watching the movie and just reporting on that anyway. In Dune Imperium, it's a worker placement deck building game where you're going to be building your deck together, and the cards in your deck are either going to let you go to a location, or you can spend them at the end to get resources to buy more cards and or fight in combat. I've played Dune Imperium quite a bit. Just played it recently, like last week. This is actually one of my favorite games, I think. This could flirt with the top 10. It's at least top 20. What I really like about it is the worker placement and the deck building is not the best at either, but it does both really well. Your deck building definitely matters, and you can either go strong deck building and make your deck really sweet, or you can go super thin. The person who won when I played with him last, Mario, he didn't buy cards for like the last 3 rounds of the game. So he just kept his deck super thin and was able to go to the spots he needed to and get points that way, because you're racing to 10 points. It is absolutely a race, and there are multiple ways to get a point. You can win combats. Some combats are worth points, some are not. You can get alliances with the certain factions in the Dune world. You can just buy a point if you have enough skill points on your cards. So there are many ways to get these 10 points, and everybody's doing it a different way. I do suggest playing this with the expansion. Dune Imperium is a fine game on its own, but once you play with the expansion, you're not going to want to go back. The expansion is great. It just adds a little bit more. You can teach it right off the bat. So for English, we're going to go with Dune Imperium based on a book, based on a movie. Next, let's head to gym, because if you were like me, our gym class was always in the morning, which sucked. You had to go change in front of all your friends, and then you got to be sweaty and smelly for the rest of the day. For our gym class, we are going to do Cubitos, which is another race, but this is more of like an actual race. You're racing along this track. You might be able to see there. I don't know how small that's going to look on the camera. It is a race with a dice rolling mechanic, and it's very similar to Quacks of Quedlinburg, which is a super popular game. I really love Quacks, but Cubitos has replaced Quacks for me as a push your luck game, because rolling dice is just fun. In this game, you're just rolling dice, and you're either let you move, or they are going to give you dollars to buy more dice, or they're going to give you a special ability. So this just reminded me of running around the track. I don't know how other schools did it, but we were required to run a mile every month. And that was like the most memorable part of gym, because everybody just hated it. Thinking back, like running a mile is not that big a deal, but I don't know, for some reason at 14 it sucked. I highly suggest this game for any play group if you like prefer lighter weight games with a lot of with some luck. This game works really well. It's one that you can just have fun with. Have high highs, you're going to have low lows. But if you're a heavier gamer, you can still enjoy this. It's going to be more fun. You don't have to math everything out all the time. You're just going to be rolling your dice, and you can make strategic decisions still. And the game has a ton of replayability, because every dice has a different set of cards. So the dice always could be doing something different. No expansions for Cubitos yet, kind of surprisingly so. But like, give me an expansion. Just give me more cards for the dice. I would love that. Next, I want to go to science class. And I actually don't own the science game I would like to talk about, because I would be remiss if I didn't bring up Genius Games. They do a whole line of science games: cytosis, genotype, subatomic. They do games with Euro mechanisms, but really stay really thematic. The games are true to what they mean, and like, yeah, some things have to be abstracted out to make sense, but they make sure the science behind it works, and it's just something I really appreciate. Genotype is one that I've always been interested in. That's a worker placement style game where you are trying to, what is it? It's something with peas, like the pea plant where they were like, what's the word for it? Breeding, crossbreeding peas using Punnett squares. That's what it is. So you're trying to roll these dice and you're drafting those dice to build different types of peas. And those peas that you create based on their recessive trait and their major trait is going to get you points. It's just really, really cool. I'm really embarrassed by not knowing that stuff. I took AP Bio. I did only get a 2 on the test though, so no college credit for me when it comes to AP Bio, but I should have known what breeding was. History class, my favorite class. Growing up, every time I went to school, I always loved history, mainly US history, but I think that's because like history class in the United States is very self-referential. Americans are very obsessed with being Americans. And so we really dive into our history, and which is kind of crazy because we're a pretty young country. The stuff that happened to us was not that long ago, unlike the rest of the world where they can have stuff from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago. But I wanted to talk about a game that is from US history, which is Twilight Struggle, which was number 1 on BGG for a time. This is a game about the Cold War from 1945 to 1989, and this will give you everything you need to know about the Cold War just from playing the game. But there's also a book in there where you can actually read about the history, which I thought was really cool. It's kind of an area majority tug of war style of game, very long. You really need to know the deck of cards, but one side is going to be playing as the Soviets and one side is going to be playing as the Americans. You're really just trying to vie for control of different regions of the map, and you're also competing in the space race. There's a nuclear track because there was so much nuclear scare. But what's really interesting about Twilight Struggle is you can get dealt a point card that says like Europe's going to score, or Americas are going to score, or Asia's going to score, or Africa's going to score. All the continents, right? I think 2 examples was plenty I went for. But that card gets in your hand. It says, okay, Asia's going to score. You have to play that card. There's no hiding behind Asia scoring. Asia's going to score. So you really have to think like, do I keep trying to vie for control in Asia? Tip my hand to that I'm trying to score Asia, which gives them. Or do you just say like, okay, I'm not going to score Asia. I'm very behind. If you're playing the Americans, you're like, the USSR has so much control there. I'm just going to have to play it. I'm going to have to take my medicine and I'm going to focus elsewhere because other scoring cards are coming up. So Twilight Struggle is just like a really, really smart game. I understand why it was number 1 on BGG. If you're at all interested in the Cold War, this is an automatic recommend for me. Even if you're not into heavier games, I think the theme will make it for you. But if you're not into history, I think this, like mechanically, this game just works. The problem with Twilight Struggle, and a ton of people have brought this up, is like if somebody knows the deck of cards and somebody doesn't, the person who doesn't is going to get throttled because you're either playing a card for an event or you're playing it for its point value, kind of like Watergate. If you've ever played Watergate, and Watergate came after this. Watergate was based on Twilight Struggle. If you know what events to look out for and plan for, you're just gonna have a better time. But Twilight Struggle is a recommend from me, but I do suggest either playing it brand new and like playing through it. I wouldn't even play a full game of it if you're playing brand new. I would just say like, hey, let's go through this set of cards and then reshuffle and try again until you guys get on the same level. All right, the last class we are going to talk about. Do we know what it is? That's right, it's math. Great job, folks. For math, I went with Smartphone Inc., which is an economic game, not a math game on its own. When I was in math, I was always helped out by real world situations. I was terrible at just saying like, hey, do this formula. I needed to know why it mattered. And in Smartphone, you're doing that. Economically, you're speaking like, okay, you have this number of units and you're selling it for this price. What market should you sell it to get the most value? And the math in this game is not too hard. I'm not saying you have to be a math genius. In fact, on the player board, they give you a little multiplication table on there. If you can even do multiplication table, your multiplication tables. It has the math table breakdown for you if you're not good at math. But this game can get very mathy. You really have to calculate because every dollar matters. And it is an area control game where you're just trying to say like, okay, I have this region, I'm going to be selling units to this region. And if you're only selling up to their demand, right? So like if you have control, you get to sell there first and you could block out the other companies. This is not as complex as you may think. That's another thing about Smartphone Inc. is like a lot of people think like, oh, it's an economic board game. There's a math. It's not going to be my cup of tea, but it's not that hard to learn. And it actually has like this really cool mechanisms for planning out your turn where you have these tiles and you're covering different pieces up, and whatever tiles you don't have covered or whatever symbols you don't have covered up on these tiles that you're placing down are going to be your actions for the round. So that's kind of a neat mechanism, and you can upgrade your tiles to make them stronger. You can upgrade or buy different tiles house, because if you want to start building more, you need more building symbols, stuff like that. That's a really interesting mechanism. It's also something that's really interesting is that the player order is based on the cost of your units. So you can make your cell phones much cheaper, which gives you the benefit of going first, but you're not going to be selling as much or for selling as much money. It gives you a lot of strategic decisions for a game that's not that hard to learn. I will say, if you do not have the expansion, I do think this game should be played with 4 or 5. If it's played with 2 or 3, there's just not going to be enough interaction. Now, Jeffo from the Discord has told me that with the expansion, it makes 2-player much more viable, but I cannot speak to that, so take it up with him if you must. That's all I have for you today. If you're interested in buying board games, may I suggest first checking your friendly local game store. For me here in Columbus, I like to go to the Guard Tower over on Trayview. If you're ever up in Halifax, it's the Boardroom Game Cafe, as you may know. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a like. Please comment below. Tell me what games you would have chosen for these school subjects. I would love to hear that. Tell me what your favorite educational games are if you have any. Come join us on the Discord. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. I love you guys, and stay blessed. Either the dice are either going to let you move. Oh my god, Jamie, am I a dummy? Oh my god, this is... Hold on, I gotta look this up now. This is going to drive me absolutely crazy. Punnett squares.